My dear brothers and sisters here at Holy Cross, we're now picking up again on the other side of Easter, our series of reflections on 1 Corinthians. We're now on the 7th chapter of 1 Corinthians, and I'd like to focus on the 17th verse of 1 Corinthians 7. It says, "However that may be, let each of you lead a life that the Lord has assigned to you, to which God called you. This is my rule in all the churches." In chapter 7, Paul is working through the issues of whether one should be married or celibate, whether one should be circumcised or uncircumcised. What Paul says here is this: I'm not interested in defining you in a really small niche, like you have to do this or you have to do that. The job here is to figure out how you are called by God, how I'm called by God, and to live out that calling with as much purpose and focus and love as possible. In other words, what Paul is saying is, don't look for some outside source to tell you how you should live your life. The law or somebody in charge can't know what it is that God is calling you to be and do. What Paul says is that he frames this really in the larger sense of what's acceptable as good, decent, and right behavior. But within those bounds of that, you've got to figure out what it is that God is calling to you. Don't look to your brother or sister and say, that looks like a good way of living my life. I think I'll be just like him or her. No, Paul says. This life of discernment, of discerning truly what it is that God is calling you and me to be, we have to be rooted deeply in prayer and understand that if we're called to be married, live that life deeply and profoundly with love and faithfulness and care and forgiveness. Live it with the great purpose that God has called you to. This is not easy, of course. We all know that we get lost on our way, or we get halfway through something sometimes and we think, boy, this is too difficult. Give me somebody else's path to walk, something that's a little bit easier. And Paul says, that don't work. You've been called by God for your specific life, not for anybody else's. Now that indeed is where the freedom of the gospel comes into play. You don't have to worry about the noise of the law outside of you or what the world says you have to be. You've got to listen to God. Oftentimes, that call comes in discernment with others. It's hard to hear the voice of God by ourselves. And oftentimes others can help us understand what the gifts are that we have. But ultimately, Paul is saying that's between you and God. And the good news is this: whatever that calling is that God calls you to, God needs you for the body of Christ. Paul is very clear about this. There are no leftovers in the body of Christ. There's nobody who's ancillary to the central point of being the body of Christ together. The hand needs the eye. The ear needs the mouth. The feet need the legs. More importantly, each and every one of us needs everyone else in the body of Christ to be true to what it is that God calls them to be. The good news is that we all have a calling from God. And it's a calling specific to us and no one else. Thank you, and God bless. Amen.